Okay, so great morning, everyone. So, welcome to our webinar today. So, I'll be your speaker for this day. My name is Christopher Ashley M. Mariano, and our topic for today is the monster under our beds, sexual abuse. So, this webinar is a joint project between NCST-IRT and NCST Senior High School Maine as our collaborative effort in spreading awareness regarding sexual abuse o pinapalawak natin ang ating kamalayan patungkol sa topic ng pang-aabuso. So ang topic na to ay hindi madalas pag-usapan dahil meron siyang tabu na nakapalibot sa kanya o kaya may stigma sa ganitong uri ng topic. At pati yung pangyayari itself is riddled with stigma. That is why it is not commonly discussed among homes. Or rather, isa siyang masalimuot na pangyayari na madalas tinatago ng bawat pamilya o di kaya ng mga biktima. So, isa sa mga layunin ng webinar na ito, ng ginawa namin, is mabawasan ang stigma at paninisi sa mga biktima ng mga ganitong uri ng krimen o ganitong uri ng actions. So, okay, moving on. So, a child should never suffer or be abused based on the fact that the responsible adult is ignorant or unable to care for a child. So ang isang bata ay hindi dapat inaabuso o hindi kaya nagdadaan sa pahirap ng buhay or hindi siya nakakaranas ng violence kasi ang bata ay inosente. At meron ang kasabihan sa field namin sa psychology o sa psikolohiya na you can make or break a child. So, imagine if ang isang kabataan ay dumadaan sa ganitong uri ng karanasan or this kind of experience. So, nababasag. We owe it to the children. Because 'di ba nga sabi ni Jose Rizal na ang kabataan ang siyang ang kinabukasan ng bayan. So, us being adults, it is our responsibility to create a safe haven, a safe sanctuary, o isang ligtas na lugar kung saan maaari sang lumaki, matuto at mag-develop ng buong buo. Yun ang responsibilidad nating mga adults. So ito yung layunin natin, kumbaga. Okay, so let's move on. Ano ba ang definition ng isang bata according to our laws and kung paano siya dinidefine sa society? So bigyan natin ng definition. Ano bang ibig sabihin ng child? No? Okay, so according sa UNCRC, so for the purpose of the presentation, ang ibig sabihin ng isang bata, a child means every human being below the age of 18. So 17 and below. And ito ay bumabangga din sa batas natin na defined ang age range ng isang bata ay 17 and below. So and we have a Republic Act protecting them, special protection of children against abuse, exploitation, and discrimination. So, but later on, sa webinar, we'll go deeper on defining ano ba yung mga batas that we can avail that protects women and children against violence. Okay, so a children refers to person below 18 years of age or those over but are unable to fully take care of themselves or protect themselves from abuse, neglect, cruelty, exploitation, or discrimination because of a physical or or mental disability or may condition sila that hindi sila, ang mind nila ay hindi mako-consider as an adult. So may special case po yan. So according to the Convention on the Rights of the Child, violence against children refers to all forms of physical or mental violence, injury and abuse, neglect or negligent treatment, maltreatment, or exploitation, including sexual abuse. So, kino-cover nito madaming broad aspects of ano yung karapatan nyong bilang mga estudyante because some of you are below 18, so you are a child, but at the same time, ang sexual abuse, malawak siya. So it protects beyond the age of 18 as well. May mga certain laws tayo dyan. So ibig sabihin nito, if naranas kayo before, baka mag-resonate sa inyo as we go along dito sa webinar, is that walang tolerable na violence against you when you were younger. So physical, ano bang physical? Binubugbog, mental violence. Ito yung mga verbal abuse. Actually, guys, the law regarding violence against women and children, isang makapangyarihan po na batas yun, ay buuin natin. Violence against, kapag nanay ka, sa akin at sa anak ko. So very strong ang law natin doon that, for example, separated ng parents, then hindi nagsusustento si tatay or si nanay, pwedeng kasuhan ng violence yon. That's emotional trauma or violence. Nababarangay po yan at pwedeng sampahan ng kaso sa korte. At the same time, verbal abuse or for example, yung pagdadamot ng may mga instances na pinagdadamot ang anak sa kanyang magulang, that could be considered as violence then as well. So negligent treatment, hindi pa kainin ng maayos or hindi nabibigyan ng tamang suporta. Exploitation at siyempre sexual abuse. So very well defined ang batas natin regarding sa rights ng kabataan. And wala siyang pinapalagpas. So ito yung mga karapatan na kailangan yung malaman ng maigi. If, for example, in the past, you have received some form of abuse, at least right now, you are going to be made aware through this webinar. Okay, so let's focus on a specific form of abuse right now. Hence, diba, the moniker of the webinar is the monster in our beds, sexual abuse. So we're going to give it a definition. So the infliction of sexual contact upon a person by forcible compulsion. So ibig sabihin sa madaling salita, any form of sexual contact that is unsolicited, there's no consent or forced consent that threatened yung other party to do sexual acts ng pinupuwersa at tinatakot, there's violence on it. The engaging in sexual contact with a person who is below a specified age or who is incapable of giving consent because of age or mental or physical incapacity. So pag pinilit, so that could be considered as abuse. The crime of engaging in or inflicting sexual abuse. So it's a very important webinar, lalo na sa mga kababaihan or kahit sa mga kahit sa mga lalaki din as well, that they'll be educated then as well to kung hanggang saan ang boundaries na allowed. No? So, pwedeng nangyari na sa inyo to, but you are not aware and you have this feeling of hindi kayo sure if tama ba yung ginawa sa inyo, and you are left wondering, nagtataka ka na, tama ba yung ginawa sa akin? You have this kind of thinking but hindi mo mabigyan ng boses. So, this webinar might give a name to your doubts, might give answers to your questions that you are looking or seeking for clarification. So, right after this webinar, please, if you have experienced any form of abuse, do not hesitate to contact the guidance office of NCST, IRT, and NCST, Senior High School Main. Do not hesitate to PM Miss Angelique Crucena, Miss Vanessa Season, and ako. And sa NASTEC naman, do not hesitate to contact Miss Donna Mar Cameron. If hindi kami available, you can always contact your teachers. Sila ang usually your first line na pwede nyong lapitan, and open naman po ang staff ng NCST to this any kind of events. But if hindi nyo malapitan ng teachers, you can tell anyone sa NCST family to message us. Ifo-forward naman po sa amin yon. If hindi nyo alam kung kanino magsasabi, bukas kamay ang NCST school system sa pagtulong doon sa mga nangangailangan, especially on these cases. So, what is child sexual abuse? So, ito yung isang mga bagay na hindi napag-uusapan madalas. So, merong mas younger version of it. As cruel as it may sound, yes, it does happen po. Child sexual abuse occurs when a person, whether young or old, male or female, uses a child for his or her own sexual gratification. So kapag ginagamit ng isang mas nakakatandang tao, ang mas nakakabata sa kanya for the pleasure, to gratify his needs, yung urges, that is against the law. That is abuse. Hindi po siya tama. Okay. So, we have laws protecting women and children for this types of behavior. So, the Republic Act 7877 or the Anti-Sexual Harassment Act of 1995. So we have laws in place para hindi maabuso, to deter abuse, at para magkaroon ng takot yung mga nagbabalak or mga abusers, because meron tayo nito, the Anti-Sexual Harassment Act. So it covers a broad range that protects those who are threatened by sexual act, or those individuals who are vulnerable. No? So let's define it. This is an act declaring harassment in unlawful in the employment, education, or training environment, and for other purposes. So this is a broad, no? Specific siya sa unlawful in the employment. So let's start with employment. So sa employment, when, for example, you have a senior manager, mas mataas sa'yo, who is using his position like, okay, mapopromote ka, but you have to do some extra act, no? If you sleep with me, you'll get promoted. So may mga ganong instances, or in some cases, that managers use their position to overpower yung mas nakakababa sa kanila. So yung iba naman dahil natatakot mawalan ng work, pumapayag sila. But this is a form of threat. There's this use of position. So unconsciously, matatakot yung mas nakakababa na mawalan ng trabaho and there's a chance na pumayag siya. So sa education, for example, sexual acts for grades, nangyayari ito. So para bigyan ng mataas ang grade, para hindi bumagsak, gagawa ng some form of action or magre-request someone from the education system and ginagawang leverage yung grade or position para ma-exploit or ma-abuse ang estudyanteng mas nakakababa sa kanila or training environment and for other purposes. So any form of coercion and a sexual act is requested, unsolicited, forced. This is a form of sexual harassment. Ino-overpower ka ng someone higher than you. And you, out of fear of losing that grade, losing that job, or wanting to be promoted, for example, that is considered sexual harassment, which is that should not be, hindi dapat siya ginagawa na mas nakakataas. Ginagamit yung position of power to abuse others for their own benefit. So according to the National Baseline Study on Violence Against Children, so NBSVAC, or the Council for the Welfare of Children, so 2015, overall, ang pinakamataas na form ng violence is 66%. So medyo nag-adjust lang yan. So ang pinakamataas ay physical violence. So this amounts sa mga abusong nararamdaman or dinadanas ng mga individual. So physical violence is the most common form, both male and female. So pambubugbog, palo, unsolicited na hampas, for example. Okay naman na magdisiplina, but the problem is minsan nasosobrahan ng disiplina, hindi na siya palo, hataw na. So psychological violence, yan, verbal abuse, minamaliit, and unwarranted hurtful na salita. So psychological violence covers a lot of things. Could be financial, di ka bibigyan ng baon, or hinohold ng parents yung financial means. So usually psychological violence, ito yung may away sa bahay, nababaling dun sa mga anak. And sadly, sexual violence. So, kung titingnan yung maigi, halos hindi nagkakalayo yung datos. So sa male, pantay lang sila sa physical violence with female. So 66.0% sa male, 66.8%. Psychological violence, 58.2% sa male, 59.8% sa babae. Sexual abuse, hindi rin nagkakalayo. Lamang ng 2% sa babae, 19.1% and 22.1%. So, what does this data mean? That both genders equally experience forms of abuse when they are younger. So there's no gender discrimination between the two kung sino yung mas may natatangkap na violence according to this data, but this is according to UNICEF. So violence takes a lot of form and hindi siya namimili ng gender. This type of abuses that happen, no? the psychological violence, the sexual abuses, the physical violence, does it really happen in a country of devout Christians? So, how about let's find out? But before that, I want you to watch a 3-minute video on who experiences sexual abuse.
Emmett, I microwaved a pizza. Want to come down for a slice?
No thanks, Mom.
You okay, bud? You sound a little weird.
Yes, I'm fine.
Grape soda?
Mom! Hello?
Thanks for texting the sexual assault hotline. My name's Jordan. Is there a name I can use for you? It doesn't have to be your real name.
How about Matt?
Cool. Glad you texted, Matt. What's up?
I don't know. Probably nothing.
Something on your mind?
Well, my swim coach keeps having me stay after practice, and he said it'll help me make first squad. Yesterday, he showed me some different stretches, and then he touched me. Down there.
I'm so glad you reached out, Matt. That really took a lot of courage. And I think I can help.
Okay.
What your coach did is called sexual abuse. And it is not your fault. Sexual abuse is when someone does something sexual to another person without that person's consent. It's not only wrong, it's against the law.
Okay, but I'm a guy. This isn't supposed to happen to me.
Actually, sexual abuse can happen to anyone, of any gender. In fact, 1 in 6 guys are sexually abused before they turn 18. So, you're not alone.
Wow, I didn't know it was so common. But it's still really hard to talk about. I feel so stupid.
I know it's tough, but please don't feel stupid. You did nothing wrong. And you know what? A lot of people feel too scared or ashamed to talk about it at all. And keeping a secret like that can cause a lot of pain. You showed real strength when you reached out.
The other thing bothering me is I'm straight, or at least I was. Does what he did mean I'm gay now?
Sexual abuse has nothing to do with sexual orientation. If you're straight, you're still straight, even though this was done by another guy. Even if your body responded in any way.
Okay, but what do I do now?
Contacting us was a great first step. There are other organizations that can help too, and they'll keep your conversations confidential. But first, you might want to talk with an adult you trust so they can get you some additional support. Do you have someone like that?
Yeah, I think I can talk to my mom.
That's great. Just remember that what happened to you was not your fault, that you did nothing wrong, that this is more common than people think, and you are not alone.
Thanks. I'm gonna get going. Hey, Mom?
You texted?
Can I talk to you about something?
If you or someone you know needs help, please talk to a trusted adult or service organization. You can also visit 1in6.org to chat with a trained advocate 24/7 or join a weekly chat-based support group.
Hi there, I'm Kim. My friends and I have some stories to share. What do you expect from being a teenager?
Going out with friends more.
Making that money!
Getting a real relationship.
Driving Dad's '69 Camaro.
Meeting new friends. Sexual assault.
What?
Sexual manipulation.
Predatory people?
Wait.
Ongoing abuse. Buried trauma.
Broken boundaries. Touching without consent.
So it turns out sexual abuse is something that a lot of us end up dealing with. It's a messed up topic that nobody wants to talk about. But while nobody's talking about it, we're living with it.
As we get older, independence and jobs and relationships, they're great. But there are a lot of things that we don't think about that can lead to sexual abuse. That's why we want to talk about it. When I started going out with friends more and doing stuff on my own, I was having fun. but I was new to a lot of things.
I knew it was possible for someone to try to take advantage of a person my age, but I never imagined it happening to me.
And I wasn't used to having to stand up for myself in an unsafe situation.
Sexual abuse can come from a relative, a boss, a teacher, a church pastor.
A scout leader, a close friend, someone on the internet.
It can even happen when you're on a date or just hanging out.
Look, it happens to both girls and boys, and we want to show you how to stop sexual abuse before it causes more pain for you or your friends.
When you really think about it, you don't have to look far to find someone that's dealt with abuse.
Or someone that's got something on their mind that hurts to talk about.
Or someone that's been taken advantage of because they're growing up and want to fit in or have a relationship.
Or someone that feels guilty or responsible for someone else's abusive behavior.
Or someone that feels isolated and trapped by a situation. Everyone's got their own story. Even though sexual abuse is hard to talk about, sharing experiences helps us recognize sexual abuse in dangerous situations in our own lives.
Bottom line, if someone's behavior makes you uncomfortable, you can tell them to stop. And if they don't stop, they're in the wrong and you should get away.
We want to talk about sexual abuse.
We want to talk about preventing it from happening.
We want to talk about listening to ourselves and not giving in to social pressure or lies.
And watching out for our friends when they're in unsafe situations.
That means recognizing how abusive people can take advantage of you.
Abuse can feel very lonely and personal, but I think that by talking about it, we can get rid of the stigma.
Sexual abuse can catch you totally off guard, but experiences like ours can show you the red flags that can help keep you safe.
So after that video, so nakita nyo na it happens in any settings. May mga predators talaga tayo kung tawagin. Merong mga mapang-abuso sa kanilang kapangyarihan. So wala silang sinasantong kasarian. So both genders are affected by the abuse. So sa example kanina, abuse in an educational setting ng authority figure, a teacher, a training coach, sabi nga dun sa video. And yes, it happens in our country. So I'll give you some examples of convicted that was made public. This is public knowledge sa newspapers, and yung dalawa is nasa law. So naging case siya, a sensational case way back in the 90s. Okay, so the first one is Leo Pilo Echegaray. So siya ay tatay, stepdad, who sexually abused yung anak ng kinakasama niya. So I believe siya rin yung huling hinatulan ng lethal injection. And his final words were, kapwa Pilipino, pumatay ng kapwa Pilipino. But he was convicted. He's a stepdad who abused yung mga anak ng kinakasama niya. So the next one is Romeo Haloshos. So this is a convicted abuser din. So alam ko nakakulong pa rin to as of the moment, and he's a political figure. So meron siyang authority. Look it up sa Google kung ano yung ginawa niya. So the details of the case are there. So he is a servant to the government. So supposedly, meron silang mandato or mandate na protektahan tayo, but instead, he's the abuser, so wala siyang pinipili. So the last one is Father Aaron, na nireklamo dahil lang abuso siya. Sexually nag-abuse din siya ng younger than him, bata yung inabuso niya. So kinasuhan din to. So they are known offenders. So dito guys, makikita natin that walang iisang muka ang isang abuser. Walang iisang pattern. So iba-iba sila, different walks of life. So Echegaray is a stepdad. Halushos was a politician. Aaron is a priest. So all of them are convicted abusers in the eyes of the law. So sa US, there are other cases then as well. But it's really sad kasi kung titingnan natin sa CNN, it really happens around the world, no? Nangyayari siya kahit dito sa bansa natin. And I don't know if in some instances that you've encountered educational teachers that engage in sexual activities with students, mayroon din po. So it has been nararanasan talaga siya ng society natin, and hindi siya namimili. So in some cases then may mga lumalapit sa amin na nakaka-counseling namin. We help them deal with the trauma kahit kaninong perpetrator. So again, if you students need our assistance, or if there are certain individuals, be as it may your teachers, educational staff, or someone from your household is doing unspeakable deeds, abuses, or committing abuses against you, please do not hesitate na makipag-coordinate sa amin. It is the mandate of the law na tulungan namin ang mga individuals, students especially, that experience some forms of violence, especially sexual abuses. Okay, so who are usually the perpetrators? So try natin sila i-profile. So the commonly cited perpetrators of overall sexual violence in the home were brothers, cousins. So among boys, mentioned most frequently were cousins, father, and brother. While among girls, the brother, stepbrother, stepsister, sister, and stepmother were mostly reported to be the perpetrators of sexual violence. So this is according to CWC. So sa bahay, halo-halo siya. Were brothers and cousin, pinsan. And sila usually ang nagko-commit ng abuse. So you will think that it is someone na hindi kakilala. But the sad part is, usually abusers, sexual abusers are the ones that you know of. Sila yung may easy access doon sa victim, may schedule doon sa biktima. And usually sila yung pinagkakatiwalaan. It's not strangers. It's someone that you know. Kakilala mo yan, your friend, your best friend, your brother or sister can commit these atrocious deeds. But hindi ko nila lahat. But what this article is trying to say is that it is someone that you know. Someone who are not necessarily may need for closeness, but someone who you know. Kakilala siya usually. If kahit titingnan natin on, let's say, sa mga palabas, Soko, investigador, it is usually someone that they know nag-commit nung deed na yon against them. So the same thing rings true to the situations. So dahil pandemic ngayon, in some instances na lockdown hindi natin alam, maybe some of our audience is stuck with their abuser right now at home. And that's a real nightmare kasi they don't have anywhere to go but face their abuser every day. And hindi natin alam on how they are surviving. If you are surviving right now, okay, so 8 out of 10 rapes are committed by someone known to the victim. So when you say rape, there are a lot of my statutory rape, my rape. So kung titingnan natin, 19.5% are committed by strangers, 39% are committed by an acquaintance, someone kakilala. 33% are committed by a current or former spouse, boyfriend, or girlfriend. So kakilala before you had intimate relationship before. 6% lang are committed by more than one person or the victim cannot remember. So ito yung inaluan ng party drug or pangpatulog na hindi nila maalala. And 2.5% are committed by non-spouse relative. So kamag-anak ang ibig sabihin yan. So this is according to the National Sexual Assault Hotline, but ang makikita nyo dito, it is someone usually that you know. Your roughly almost 40% kakilala siya. Because you trust them and they take this trust and use it against you. Pwedeng kapitbahay yan, pwedeng kakilala, or something of the sort. Okay, so the majority of children and teen victims know the perpetrator. So kakilala nila yung umaabuso sa kanila or the abuser. They know it. Of the sexual abuses cases reported to law enforcement, 93% of juvenile victims knew the perpetrator. 59%, almost 60% were acquaintances at somehow they've met, nakilala someone na tropa ng tatay nila, tropa ng nanay. The sad part is 34% were family members. This could range from lolo hanggang sa pinsan. And only 70% were strangers to the victim. But majority is kakilala and relative. So, kaya it's a myth na hindi kakilala yung gagawa nito or dahil sa suot nila kaya sila inaabuso or nare-rape. There's no correlation between the two according to studies and research. So, that is part of the problem kaya hindi ma-destigmatize or hindi makahingi ng tulong ang mga abused. Lalo na mga lalaking na abuso, na rape. They're not wearing skimpy outfits. But still, inaabuso sila ng someone they know. Could be relative, could be kakilala. So pag nasa bahay, so paano yung mga children that are being abused? Wala naman silang kamuwang-muwang sa suot nila. And yet, they are being abused or nagiging target for abuse. So, abusers usually target those who are weaker than them. Mas mahina sa kanila. So, okay, moving on. So, these are artworks depicting of the control and abuse na maaaring dinadanas ng isang bata sa kamay ng mas nakakatanda sa kanya. So, forms of sexual violence among children at home. You might have experienced this or not. So, touching, hipo. So, ito yung, for example, nandyan si someone nakakilala, tropa ni tatay, uncle, or friend. Touching, hipo. Kaya it's good advice that you do not let any male or female adults unless to touch private parts ng mga bata. It is ideal na yung nanay dapat, the mother who all pag for example sa daughter, dapat yung nanay ang maasikaso pag sa mga masiselan na bahagi ng katawan. So touching could be yung hipo sa braso, sa hita. Okay, so grooming, condition to be prepared for sexual contact. So grooming, ito yung you are conditioning someone younger, or someone younger is being conditioned by someone older that they will have a sexual encounter or contact someday. So pine-prepare niya. In a way, parang it's a form of brainwashing, verbal deception. So pwedeng minamanipula ng someone older, mas nakakabata, to get something that he wants. So verbal deception, no? Drug or given alcohol, nilalasing, dinodroga, threatened with the weapon. So kapag hindi mo ginawa ito, itong gusto kong mangyari, may mangyayaring masama sa'yo. Or threatened with a knife, a gun. Since younger, so natatakot yung bata or someone younger. Or this is the sad part, was sold or given as a gift by parents relative to the perpetrator. So nakikita natin sa balita, ito yung mga binebenta ng nanay. I don't know if napapanood nyo yung documentary. I forgot if it's Jessica Soho or sa ABS-CBN before. It's about how prostitution starts. So usually the story goes na nanay, the mother or the parents, is either a pimp. When you say pimp, or a nanay is dating prostitute, so binebenta niya yung anak niyan sa mga kakilala. I forgot if kay Jessica Soho to, but I think somewhere around Subic or Olongapo. So yung history ng mga prostitute at some point, or sex workers, is that at a young age they were sold off by their parents para maipasok doon sa industriya ng pagpoprostitusyon. So may mga ganun na rape sila, that binigay. Yes, this happens, hindi po siya teleserye. Naging documentary po siya before. So verbal bribery. If you really love me, you should give yourself to me. So this is part of verbal deception. Na kapag mahal mo ako, ibigay mo sa akin lahat. So pinapaikot niya using that love as bait, or parang carrot on a stick, makuha yung gusto niya. So pinipilit. Or love bombing kung tawagin, blackmailing. So if hindi mo gagawin to, may masamang mangyayari sa family mo. So bribery, grades, yan. Money, favors. So this is sexual violence among children at home. So ganun siya. There are many forms of abuses that children might encounter. So, or sad to say, that some of our audience might have experience, but hindi lang sila naglalakas loob mag-share kasi nga they are afraid of that stigma na mahusgahan sila ng society. Okay, so let's move on to the other slide. Ano ba ang epekto ng abuse or sexual abuse sa kabataan or sa isang bata? So the inquiry has heard that child sexual abuse can have a wide-ranging and serious consequences. For some victims and survivors, these effects endure throughout adult life. So dahil traumatizing event for the child, dinadala nila yan hanggang pagtanda. So the nature of trauma doon sa bata, lalo na if the trauma is unprocessed, hindi na tingnan ng psychologist, hindi na therapy, there's a probability that they'll develop a psychological disorder. So madami siyang forms. So usually the trauma is like a volcano. So post-traumatic stress disorder. So sasabog siya bigla, naipon din, puputok at some points of in their lives, and it takes other forms as well. So some cases, PTSD, untreated PTSD hampers, nahahamper yung development ng bata. So iba development ang mangyayari sa kanya, or kaya nga PTSD is considered as a disability kasi talaga nagbabago ang brain chemistry ng isang individual and how their brain develops then as well. So kapag tanda, iba din ang functioning nila because nag-develop differently because of the trauma. So may psychological effect po yung physical effect, nagro-root siya dun sa psychological effect nung trauma. So it really changes the behavior. So child abuse can affect psychological and physical well-being, family and intimate relationships. Yes, it does. It changes yung family dynamics. There's a lot of guilt that is going to happen, or unprocessed anger from the victim. Siyempre, sasama yung loob niya dahil ba't hindi ako naprotektahan or hindi ako napakinggan or bakit ako sinisisi dun sa nangyari. And it can affect intimate relationship. Minsan, nararamdaman ng magulang that they failed their child. So, maraming burden and guilt na baon. Faith. It's either an individual loses faith yun, dahil doon sa experience na nangyari sa kanila. Education, because of the persistent trauma, flashback of memories. So, apektado ang study, hard to focus, madaling magalit, madaling mainis, mahirap maalala ang lessons. And this is persistent all throughout hanggang pagtanda nila. Victims and survivors can also be 2 to 4 times likely to becomes victim of sexual, physical, or emotional abuse again in their lifetime. So nagiging silang mas vulnerable to these types of predation, or na-abuse sila sa relationship, emotional abuse because of what they had experienced. So this is the example of that. I find this art may relation doon sa previous slide because of how abuse and trauma shatters a person into pieces. Then it's really hard na mabuo ulit. It will take a lot of processing. Could take years, take months bago siya mabuo ulit. Okay, so another effect of sexual abuse sa isang bata is can cause difficulties in forming intimate and trusting relationships. So remember, di ba, doon sa previous slide that it is someone that they know, the abuser is someone that they know, that yun ang perpetrator. So yung trust, mahirap mabuo sa kanila because of the trauma. Because relationships can remind victims and survivors of the sexual abuse. And there may be emotional barriers that make it difficult to talk about sexual abuse with partners. So, syempre, sa isang naabuso, may fear sila that they will not be accepted for who they are and what they have experienced. They are afraid of judgment because yung situation ng isang abuse ay hindi madali. And only those who have experience will truly understand kung ano yung pinagdaanan nila. So will take a lot of patience and acceptance kasi the trauma will always be there. It will be present, of the fear na mangyari na naman sa kanila, of the fear of them being taken advantage of. Kaya it's really difficult for them to relate to another person. But that is not their own doing. Because of the abuse, naka-defensive mode sila. Their body is reacting to the situation ulit kahit tapos na, let's say, tapos na yung period of abuse. But yung after effects niya can be felt through years. So parang they're living the moment of the abuse. And it's something that it's really hard for them to deal with. So they are like birds trapped in a cage. So that what makes their experience extremely difficult. So if you are a victim of abuse or any kind of form of abuse, do not hesitate to message the guidance office para mapag-usapan at paproseso natin yung pinagdaanan nyo if you have any. Or if you know someone, maybe you can refer sa guidance office. Okay, so another effect of child sexual abuse. Victims and survivors feel that the child sexual abuse they suffered has damaged their relationships with their parents or siblings. Yes, it does. They have this kind of thought and thinking. Number one, if family member ang nag-commit ng abuse, mawawala yung tiwala. Sometimes, kasi when family members, it can range from anyone in the family that could commit the abuse. So, nadadamage yung relationship. For example, this is some real stories na hindi mademanda yung perpetrator kasi relative. First degree relative could be father, could be brother. So, the family, kaysa to spare the family ng kahihiyan, they do not pursue yung pag-charge. Pero, para dun sa biktima, nasaan yung hustisya? So, masisira yung family dynamics. So, and syempre, minsan, dahil na sobrang grabe yung nangyayari, hindi naniniwala kaagad ang family members na magagawa ito ng someone. They know someone close to them. At first, they do not believe the victim or sinisisi pa dun sa biktima. So, usually, the victim would often feel left out or mag-isa siya na invalidated yung feelings niya. So, ito yung mga hindrance dun sa process of healing ng isang biktima ng sexual abuse. Then there's also a lot of blame, like hindi sometimes the victim would feel kasi bata na bakit hindi ako pinotektahan ng parents ko or somehow nagkulang yung magulang nila sa pagbibigay ng protection that they needed from the abuse. So there's unprocessed feelings of anger that surface out dun sa psyche ng isang trauma victim. This is how they feel. So hindi ganun kasimple when someone is abused sexually man, physically man, or emotional. It takes years of processing. So it's not something to scoff at or minamaliit or minimize yung experiences ng mga nakadanas ng abuse. So, it is imperative for the audience to also educate yourselves, lalo na if you know someone who went through this kasi napakasela ng sitwasyon. And if bata pa, young, pwedeng mag-break or make doon sa situation. It's either pwedeng mag-mature, mag-develop, or pwedeng mag-cascade into a different psychological disorder that could appear later in life. But pag tinrace mo, there's always this element of trauma, unprocessed trauma, leading to a development of a kind of psychological disorder. So this is another art of a victim and the abuser. So around the time of sexual abuse, children can experience a range of emotion. No? Could be fear, sadness, galit. blame, and confusion. And 38 to 39 of victims, so this is according to a study, number of victims that ito yung nararamdaman nila. So they feel humiliated or self-conscious and will often not feel equipped or able to talk what has happened, because the nature of trauma is that they tend to forget kung ano yung nangyari kasi sobrang painful nung experience. So some of the memory, if they try na alalahanin, is masakit. Hindi lang basta masakit, it's like they're living it, like there's physical pain when they try to remember these things. Kaya very, yung memory nila at best nagiging foggy, mabigat tandaan. There's this strong resistance of remembering kung ano yung nangyari. The most common issue reported were depression, 33%. So naguguho ang mundo nila. Lack of trust in authority, since an authority figure took advantage of their innocence. Thoughts of suicide, anxiety, self-harm, and attempted suicides. So madami silang nararanasan. So anxiety, fear, self-harm, panic attacks, low self-confidence, obsessions, eating disorders, and alcohol and drug abuse nung according to the study. So yung they turn into alcohol to cope up with the pain, para lang makalimutan yung sakit. Panic attacks is na baka mangyari na naman sa kanila yun. Self-harm, just dinadivert yung pain sa pagsusugat sa sarili. And that overlooming fear over their heads, yun yung nadadama nila, buong buo sa kanila yun. So, being taken advantage of. So, we cannot really blame the victims for what they are feeling. Hindi siya simpleng makukuha sa advicean lang. These individuals, these people need help. The best support that we could give them is listen. If nagkwento sa inyo, do not invalidate what they are saying. Just listen. Do not give advice unless nanghihingi sila. But sometimes the problem with people is that pag may nag-open up, advice is ready on the way. Baka hindi naman yun yung kailangan niya. Maybe the victim just needs someone na pakikinggan siya to accept yung nangyari sa kanya. So by them voicing out how they feel or what they felt or their feeling about themselves validates their own feelings, kasi napapakinggan nila as during the moments that they share these details with you, and napapakinggan nila sarili nila without another human being trying to put the words in their mouth kung ano dapat ang gawin nila, kung ano dapat ang sabihin nila. Just be there and pakinggan nyo sila when they share about these things. So, this is the best first aid kapag may nag-open up sa inyo, a friend of yours, or do not advise them na mag-move on na lang, because that's very insensitive. No one really knows what they went through, not us. Only them will really know kung ano ba talaga yung naranasan nila. Pakinggan lang natin sila. And i-minimize yung pagbe-blame. It's not their fault on the abuse that they felt or what happened to them. None of it is their fault, and they have been taken advantage of. This is what often people forget. Tinake advantage sila in some way or in some form. Okay, so another effect, syempre yung guardian and parents, is may epekto rin sila mararamdaman. Survivor's guilt. They feel guilty as if na bakit ako nabuhay? Bakit nangyari sa akin to? Bakit sa anak ko nangyari? Sense of powerlessness because they were so helpless sa situation na it happened under the roof of their home. For example, a family friend did this. The abuse was made by a family friend and walang nagawa ang parents kasi hindi nila alam. Mabigat din sa kanila. So hindi lang yung biktima, kundi pati yung family members. They will feel the effect of that, of the abuse. So nagka-cascade siya. Nagdo-domino effect. And sinisisi ng parents. And at first there will be denial na hindi nila matanggap na nangyari that a crime happened inside of their home. Krimen yun nangyari. Crime. Pag titingnan natin sa definition ng batas, abuse is punishable under the law. So therefore, it's a crime. So, para kang ninakawan sa sarili mong bahay pero wala kang nagawa. But metaphoric ang dating, hindi pera, hindi gamit yung ninakaw. Kung hindi, something much more important than this valuable things. Ang pera na babawi yan, ang gamit na bibilian. But the innocence loss, ang pagka-inosente ng bata pag nawala, it's gone forever. And yung iiwan niya is trauma. Hindi lang doon sa biktima, pati doon sa immediate family. So, traumatic sa lahat of the vicinity of the crime. So it's a crime. So some parents will deny na nangyari because they feel as if nagre-reflect sa kanila yon that this is their failure as a parent. Nung guardian to failure to protect yung biktima. So yung trust and innocence loss, ito yung umiikot sa bahay ng someone na nakadanas ng abuse. So, after that, apektado din ang education ng isang biktima and later in life. So, the inquiry or the study has heard that victims and survivors respond to child abuse, sexual abuse in different ways. So, dropping out of school, mahirap makapag-focus. Like, the panic attacks is severe, hindi makapag-focus. Academic difficulties, walang gana mag-aral. In some cases, the school becomes their form of coping from the trauma as long as the support system is good. Merong mga school system that is effective, that is very supportive when it comes to their students na nakaranas nito. And we extend this support from the NCST, Senior High School Main, and IRT, and NASTEC. Binibigay namin yung full support namin on dealing with these kinds of situations na naka-prepare po ang school systems natin in handling cases such as this because we understand yung severity of the situation ng isang biktima na buo dapat ang support sa bahay, support sa school, and naka-ready kami in case na may lumapit or pag may lumalapit sa amin, we hear them out. Dinadama namin at pinapakinggan namin ng maigi yung sitwasyon if meron ng mga biktima. So just to be aware, para doon sa viewerships natin ngayon dito sa webinar, for the audience, for the students, that we have specific Republic Acts that protect women and children from such acts. So the Anti-Rape Law of 1997. So the Republic Act 9262, Anti-Violence Against Women and Their Children Act of 2004. Kapag ikaw ang nanay, ang other term dyan is violence against me and my children. So sakop din yan, malawak din ng sakop yan. And the Safe Spaces Act that promotes safe environment for women para hindi sila binabastos, na walang karapatan ang kahit sa sino man ang mangbastos sa kanila regardless of what's happening or what they are wearing. Defined po yan sa Safe Spaces Act. So, Republic Act 9262, Anti-Violence Against Women and Their Children, it is hereby declared that the state values the dignity of the women and children and guarantees full respect for human rights. So, sa preamble po natin, kasama po ang human rights. The state also recognizes the need to protect the family and its members, particularly women and children, from violence and threats to their personal safety and security. Pag sinabing personal safety, that includes financial, emotional, psychological support. So, kailangan bigyan sila ng sense of security. So, ito ang mga form ng abuses para aware ang mga tao, kababaihan, at if may anak kayo, ito yung mga kino-consider abuse ng Estado. Economic abuse, pagdidelay, pagbibigay ng allowance, financial support if separated po ang mag-asawa, pag hindi nabigyan ng sustento, that's a form of economic abuse na dedemanda po yun. Psychological abuse, ano bang form of psychological abuse? Verbal, yung masasakit na sa salita, hindi pakikipag-usap, hindi pakikipag-communicate sa anak, that's psychological abuse. Pangbababae or may ibang partner, panlalalaki. Infidelity is a form of psychological abuse. Defined po yan. And pwede pong maging grounds po yan. Lalo na that is abuse for the child. Yung malalaman niya na nambababae. Or for example, sa isang mag-asawa, malaman niya yung partner niya may other partner. So that's psychological abuse. Physical abuse, physical yung pangbubugbog. Sexual abuse. So all of its form covered yan sa Republic Act 9262. And next is Republic Act 11313, or known as the Safe Space Act. It is policy of the state to value the dignity of every human person and guarantee full respect for human rights. It is likewise the policy of the state to recognize the role of women in nation building and ensure the fundamental equality before the law of women and men. So equality. The state also recognizes that both men and women must have equality, security, safety, not only in private, but also in the streets, public spaces, online workplace, and education and training institution. So hindi na pwedeng pagpito, Safe Spaces Act, or medyo double meaning na compliments, mga strangers na tawag sa, I don't know if napapanood yun sa lumang palabas, may witwiw, mga tipong ganon na type, mga stereotypes, or hi miss, hi sexy, mga ganyan, that's no longer allowed sa Safe Spaces Act. Basta may establish that there's this act of indecency and lasciviousness on the part of the perpetrator, pwede kang kasuhan nito. So what do you call if you think you're a victim of abuse? So number one, the DSWD. Actually sa DepEd, if you're here from DASMA, you can actually go to their office. Mismo sa office nun, and you can ask help. PNP Women's Desk, available yan. Your teachers, kapag hirap kayo mag-open up, sa aming mga guidance counselors and advocates, and barangay. Actually, the barangay will step in. Sila yung first, if you want to establish, if you're experiencing violence, sisimulan nyo sa barangay para may record. Para well documented in case. So, possible conditions that may appear after the abuse. So, PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, traumatic event. But take note, guys, of all the pwedeng makaranas ng traumatic experience, critical incident kung tawagin, but only 3% will develop PTSD. Yung iba nakakapag-cope up, but yung trauma, it's still there, yung takot nandoon. Anxiety, depression. So, anong support ang pwedeng i-avail if you're a victim of abuse, at least sa part ng institution? So, counseling, we do that. We offer counseling to everyone, both students and employee, as a part of our continued service to the internal and external clients ng NCST para makatulong, bigay tulong. Psychotherapy, may partner clinics po tayo that we can refer if we believe the case goes beyond sa counseling session that is in need of professional help. So, psychoeducation is important. So, affiliated din po ang guidance office natin to well-known clinics sa Cavite, such as Balay Psikolohiya and Psych Solution Psychological Services para sa psychotherapy. So, psychoeducation, we can educate. The webinar itself is a form of psychoeducation. Itong webinar that we offer, I believe this have been our third webinar for this school year. And this is our continued service para po dun sa mga students namin na nanonood ngayon, and contribution sa society for those audiences that are watching pero not part of the school system. And of course, for our employees din as well. So this ends our webinar presentation. So again, my name is Christopher Ashley M. Mariano, and I'm thanking everyone for the opportunity to be your speaker once again. So have a good day. Maraming salamat.